paper number 10 of 1965 on what we call African socialism, but ultimately we are bought by the West, and we have remained so bought. And I'm mentioning this that you may understand before I'll come to the second tier of my intervention. That is Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Then we come to Rwanda, Urundi. When we come to Rwanda, Urundi, these are, the conflict is manufactured. The Belgians have created an environment which is going to be a powder keg in both Rwanda and in Burundi in 1962. They have attacked the monarchy in Rwanda. They have created animosity between two peoples whom they call the Tutsi and the Hutu. The Batwa are too small demographically. And ultimately, you now have this conflict that you have the genocide in 1959 and ultimately the genocide in 1994 and the ongoing animus between Rwanda and Burundi. And of course, we know the Paul Kagame administration that is still in power. And RPF is also in the nature of a political movement which is a liberator. So that if you look at the intellectual inclination of the two leaders of Uganda and Rwanda, they are ideologically of the same persuasion. Ideologically, because they were liberators, and their thinking is that they are people who are indispensable, and they have no shortage of people who also tells them that you are Moses holding rod and staff in your hand, parting Red Seas. We want you to continue parting Red Seas. So they are caught up between the adoration by the people that they lead and the demands of these things you call constitutionalism. So when you talk to President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni or you talk to Paul Kagame and you tell them, let us have term limits, he says, but that is Western democracy. My people still think that I should serve them. Who are you? And that argument, there are those who think it is a legitimate question and is a legitimate issue. My friend Norbert, of course, did say, and those of you who are readers of Shakespeare will remember that there is a play by Shakespeare called Measure for Measure. It was written in the year 1623. And one of the quotations you get there is that if you have the power of a giant, it is excellent to have the power of a giant, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant. And there is also a saying, I think the Baganda also put it, I've repeated it times without number, that no matter how good a dancer you are, you must know when to leave the stage. This is, when we talk about term limits, this is what we are saying. And Nyerere put it so very well in 1985. He said, you are not successful until your successor succeeds. And I think there is merit in that. So when we talk about constitutionalism, we also must remind ourselves, even as I say what I'm saying, we must remind ourselves that there is also culture with which we are fighting. There is a cultural issues. If you are an Omugabe or a Kabaka, you don't cede power. It's God who denies you when he takes you upstairs. How do we deal with those realities? So when we talk about that, then you can see the difficulties with freedom fighters. Tanzania is a different kettle of fish. Those of you who had the advantage of working with Nyerere, I interned with him when he left power. And actually, before 1984, 9th day of December, when I first met him, he understood the dynamics of power. He understood the dynamics of and the frailty of the African nation, the post-colonial African nation. Tanzania has 136 ethnicities, governed differently before the colonialists came. Then you gridlock them into this thing called Tanzania. And he asks, what is Tanzania? Because the first point of identification is that I'm higher. I'm a Mnyamwezi. How do you reconcile your Nyamweziness with your Tanzanianness? When you come to Uganda, you are Baganda, you are Choli. How do you reconcile your Bagandaness and Choliness, Choliness with your Ugandanness? In the context of this broad brush constitution that talks about an independent judiciary, talks about a legislature, talks about the civil society, talks about the executive, and talks about human rights, which according to that constitution were conceived with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. How do you deal with it? When you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, there are 233 ethnicities and counting. So that when that country is regaining her independence in 1960 with Patrice Emery Lumumba, on day number 1, and I want you to listen to the speech of Lumumba on the day that they were being granted independence. Listen to the speech of Lumumba and the speech of Kasavubu on that day. These are two people going to lead a nation, and they are already thinking differently. And no wonder within 9 months, Lumumba had been assassinated, leading, of course, to Kasavubu and ultimately to the kakistocratic kleptocracy of Mobutu Sese Seko. Kakistocracy to mean a government by your very worst, and kleptocracy to mean a government of thieves. And Congo has never been at rest. So you can have the best constitution you have. But he's talking about Bakongo. He's talking about Bangala. He's talking about Batetela. How do you deal with that? That is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Then we come to Somalia, which is in trouble and where the Ugandan troops are. What is Somalia? Somalia that we know was actually, part of it was a colony of the Italians, which in itself was a sick man of Europe. And then there was a Somaliland, which was a colony of the United Kingdom. On the eve of independence, they are united. And that is why you now see what is happening. If you saw the original flag of Somalia, it has 5 stars to talk about the Somali nation. Somalis in Somalia, Somalis in Ogaden in Ethiopia, Somalis in Djibouti, Somalis in Somaliland. So there is what in law is called irredentism, the desire to claim lost territory, which still, and of course Somalis in Kenya. When you have a constitution that is irredentism,